All right, welcome to the Design Build Show. We on a boat on a stranded island in Mexico, and we do the Design Build Show anywhere.
That's right.
Yeah, we're not in Mexico, we're in Florida, but we are on a boat, pretty much on an island to get away from our kids to do this. So this is Tim Fiorillo, my great friend and amazing builder, design builder. You know, definitely I've been wanting to get him on the show for a while. I could go on and on. I could just talk for like the whole show about you. But Tim, I've known Tim for, I don't know how long, over 20 years, I'd say.
Yeah.
And I worked as an architect at a studio. While I was there, I realized I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I'd never built before, and I felt extremely deficient in that. And so I was doing that in LA, and I moved back to the East Coast, and I wanted to fill that void, and Tim was one of the guys who was dumb enough to hire me as a carpenter. And I wasn't a great carpenter, but I have some of my best stories from Tim's job sites. I fell off a roof, but I survived very well. I messed up a whole shingle siding. Tim left me on my own for too long.
Didn't work out.
And but Tim's got I'm gonna let him talk in a minute, but he's got a civil engineering background, and he is, in terms of carpentry skills, one of the greatest. You know, there's guys who can do things extremely high at a high level, but then the greatest carpenters I've seen have that, but they also have a speed. Like they can mix it. Like they can look at, you know, what the job is at hand, and you like it's like an art form. Yeah. I don't know if you still have those skills, but
Getting older now.
yeah. Well, what is your background? You tell me about like your background in terms of you know, how you got into this business and what have you.
Okay. I went to a trade school for my high school for carpentry, and that's where I started to learn carpentry.
And that was a decision, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, it was a decision. I mean, my parents didn't want me to go to the particular local high school, and they said, you know, you can go to this kind of a strict all-boys school, or there's this trade school you could go to. So I said, I'll do the trade school. But it was a great experience, and I got to work with a remodeling contractor quite a bit who taught me a lot. And then I liked doing carpentry work when I was going to college. I did small jobs on the weekends and for money, and did design work for a while for an engineering firm, but just kind of liked being out into the field. And then I worked for a big contractor doing high-rise buildings type thing as a field engineer, and ultimately decided to go off on my own.
You worked on the Big Dig, right?
Worked on the Big Dig for a little while as an intern, but that was fascinating. Learned a lot, met some cool people.
Logan Terminal.
Yeah, we did. That was my last assignment. I was a field engineer on a foundation for a new terminal at the airport, and went off on my own and mainly just doing carpentry work. And we slowly kind of evolved into doing general contracting work, and we got larger and larger, and ultimately got into doing these larger scale renovation projects. My goal, I really wanted to do design, bid, build. I wanted people to come to me with plans, I give them a price, build it. Mm-hmm. That was really my goal all along. I kind of resisted getting involved with design work.
Why is that? Why?
It was just what I was into. I mean, that's, you know,
just wanted to build.
I just wanted to build. I mean, I'm into the architecture and that stuff, but I just wanted to do the building. I'm into the building science of it, and the excitement of building. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so we experimented with that for a while, and ultimately it just became a problem for us, because what we noticed is 4 out of 5 sets of plans that came across my desk were never built.
Wow. Wow. That's an amazing statistic. statistic.
Yeah. And so obviously we were only getting a proportion, a percentage of those, of the 20% that were going to ultimately be built. Now we're only able to secure a certain percentage of those. So I felt that I was spending an enormous time on estimating and sales.
What happened to the 4 that didn't go into construction? Like, why didn't they happen?
Almost all of them, I would say, were for budget reasons. They were just designed over budget.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah, I feel like your market too, the client you serve, it's not the Uber, like rich money is no option client, but it is a client who does, it's a significant project. They've been educated to think, okay, I need to hire an architect, and so they go down that route. But then money is a factor.
Sure.
Because I think about the design bid build model, and architects today they're not trained like me. I didn't know how to build, so I didn't know what buildings cost. So while I'm designing, that's a component that I was not able to think with,
right,
which is actually in crazy to actually do that. And Tim, that's what he's talking about. Like those 4 out of 5 got to bid, found out what it cost, and were like,
better off moving.
The project blew up then, yeah.
Right.
But where was I going with this? So, yeah, I mean, it's crazy. It's just crazy.
Yeah, it is. And so ultimately we started getting into what we started doing, because I was resisting doing design build. So we started referring architects to people, and kind of having some involvement in helping the architect budget. And then we just realized it just got to a point where that didn't even make sense. So we started covering the architecture work as well. And it's just it's so much more efficient for everybody.
Yeah, we're gonna get into some specific stories because Tim's told me some great stories, but yeah, just that, I mean, for you though, it's really like your control of a project, if you were coming in on the back end, was significantly lessened, right?
Yes, and this way, the other thing that would happen when I was coming in on a project, often there are problems, miscommunications, design errors, these kind of things, misinterpretations that would turn into finger pointing and just made projects more difficult than they really seemed like they needed to be.
Yeah. So now what do you do?
So now we have architect. Our architect is just another subcontractor of ours. So we come in right from the beginning. We establish a budget. First, second meeting with the customer. Usually by the second meeting, we have a budget, and then we just design to that budget. And the model works great.
That's cool. So one thing that's coming out, you may have heard of it or not, but there's architect-led design build and then contractor-led design build. Have you ever heard of those?
No, but a similar, I guess maybe this is where he was going with it, but we just had a similar conversation with somebody, and with an architect.
Yeah.
And I wasn't really sure how to go about it, because we've always led the process.
Yeah.
And it just seemed like by us leading it, we're starting with the numbers at the beginning, and it just seemed like a better way to control it.
Yeah. So the thing for me on that is like, it kind of defeats the purpose of design build.
Right.
Because all that's getting back to is this separation.
Right.
And the whole point of design build is to have one source of accountability, and that accountability needs to be, the ideal scene is have all those components. Because when you're saying architect-led design build, all somebody's really saying is like the design is the most important thing.
Right.
And then when it's contractor design build, it's like the cost is the most important thing.
Right.
But really, like, that's bullshit. If you're a true design builder, in my opinion, all those are tantamount.
Right.
And need to be at the highest level. And yeah, cost is a factor. I know what I was thinking with before, but like that uber high rich person, I think the reason where that client really, I think, is more where the architect is best suited, because the architect, if you're talking generalities, has amazing ideas. That's what they're trained in today,
Right.
is to design
Right.
at a high level. And cost is not a factor, but with that high-end client, they don't not care about cost, but they're still able to do the project.
Yes,
Like, I think that is the difference.
for sure.
Where
Yeah.
it's like, you get to a certain net worth or whatever, and they're like, oh, what the hell? But they're like, they can do it anyway.
Right.
You
Exactly.
hear me? So like, but like,
Exactly.
you know, our clientele maybe is not like, at a certain point, they're like, I can't do this job, and so I'm gonna move.
Right.
Because it doesn't make sense.
Right, right. Because ultimately, the projects that have been successful, because we've done many successful projects in this design bid build model, but those are projects where maybe the customer has $500,000 and they're looking to do a $150,000 project. Budget comes in, it's $200,000. They're willing to go with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But most of our clientele, it is the value of their property is a big concern of theirs, and then how much money
They
they're
don't
going
want
to
to
have.
overdevelop.
They don't want to
or-
overdevelop the
yeah.
property. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. But back to this architect-led contract. So, playing the devil's advocate, you know, I bet that's like the stigma there. So, how do you overcome that? Because you just said, you know, we designed to a budget, but how do you still ensure that it is great design and it is the right project and the best design for that project?
Well, we only hire great designers,
Okay.
and you know, again, with the builder involved from the beginning, we can very clearly lay out options. And then the customer really has a good understanding of what their options are and what the cost benefit of these different options are. So maybe they really want, you know, an extra 500 square feet, and they see the value of that. You know, they see what the cost of that is, and they can weigh out at the, you know, with the architect while we're all sitting at the table. They can make that decision. Is that worth the money for us or not? I mean, I have countless stories of people where I sit in on every meeting with the architect, and some of these meetings some meetings I don't say much at all, but my role is to be there because the architects that we hire are good architects. They're good designers, and there's a lot of good designers and artists out there. And what'll happen is you'll be sitting talking the nitty gritty of a particular design or a particular aspect of a design, and the architect throws out a brilliant idea. And the customer, it's a brilliant idea. The customer recognizes that. They say, yeah, that's a great idea. Let's do that. And then I'm there to say, well, that is a great idea, but just so you know, that's a $20,000 item or a $30,000 item. And oftentimes that conversation will end right then and there. If the budget's already tight, the people say, you know what? We're not going to go down that road then.
Leave it
Thank
alone,
you.
yeah.
Leave it alone, and then we continue down the right path.
Yeah.
Or they say, sometimes we've had them say, we've thrown $30,000 items out at people, and then right then and there, the husband and wife look at each other and they say, yeah, I think that would be worth that money.
Yeah. But they have the information there to make a decision.
Exactly.
And they're not blindly going to like develop that design, invest time in that design, be committed and like, you know, fall in love with that design only to find out the cost later and it potentially be a problem. So you have a design build team and you've isolated, hey dude, I just want to build. I know what things cost, but that is needed to get a real product in the design process.
Right.
And you have your designer, your architect who has that role, but you are collaborating at the right point to enable this client to have all the information to make a decision on the right project for them, right?
Right. Because you see it all the time where people do fall in love with the plan. They work with an architect for months and months and spend tens of thousands of dollars, and they fall in love with this beautiful plan. And then they bring contractors out there and they're just heartbroken. A lot of times it starts with disbelief that, you know, they just think, you know, the first contractor they talk to, oh, he was just an expensive contractor, so they call another one. I mean, he's an expensive contractor, they call another one.
Yeah.
And by the fourth or fifth contractor, they realize, oh, okay, I guess there's something wrong with our plans here.
Yeah. So next time somebody has this architect-led contract, I want to say, listen, man, we do it all at the highest level. That's what we're going for. We're going for there's an optimal project out there for this client, and that's what we're looking to achieve. So, you know, because I think the thing about design bid build and design build, you know, buildings go up all the time. You freaking did however many buildings you did design bid build. So it's a workable system, right?
As long as the budget's there, and we still do a fair amount of design bid build work. It's just that those happen to be projects where the people have the budget to afford it.
Yeah. But even for those folks, you know, maybe I bet if you asked them, they might do that bigger project. But I bet if you asked them, they would have liked to had the more determinism, like have more like say in it, as opposed to have found out later down the road.
For sure. And
it's just a misnomer, I think, to have this, you know, what we're looking to achieve. It's just a more efficient way to do it, because the end product can actually be the same, but I think a big thing about design build, it's just a much more efficient way to achieve maybe the same product.
Exactly.
But you look at, you know, there's different ways to bake a cake. Like I can freaking cut things. It probably takes me like compared to a chef who's a professional and he's like,
right.
You know, I could, and the end product maybe is very similar, but there's also like, how much time did it take? What was the experience?
Right.
What was like the back and forth and the freaking like,
well, I can tell you for sure in our model, the homeowner ultimately saves money, the architect makes more money, and the builder makes more money.
Yeah.
Everybody's happy at the end of the day.
It's a win-win, dude.
For sure.
And this adversarial relationship is your team.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And you know what? See, a big thing about me and this design build movement is finding the truth of like, how the hell did we even get here? Because that was a big thing for me, because I went to school. I remember like in high school, I was like, I saw these pictures of these amazing builds. I was like, I want to do that. What do I do? They're like, you got to go to school to be an architect. I was like, all right, I'm going to go to school to be an architect. I got it in school. I'm like, I don't even know how the fuck to like, I don't even know how to like, I couldn't even like build it with sticks.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I was like, I was so deficient. So it was like, how did we get here? Where the training of an architect, and I've done extensive research. We gonna get interrupted.
I don't know. There's fish swimming around here.
All right. I think this is like people want us back in the party now, so we're gonna wrap it up a little bit, but if you look at how this adversarial relationship got set, I'm gonna do a history lesson real quick. I think it was 1564.
Okay.
This dude John Shute, architect. He's the first time he wrote this book, and it was the first time architect was word in the English language. It came from Italy and France, and they had like similar words, but they're in French and Italy. So, and it was like towards the end of the Renaissance, and the word was rediscovered in the Renaissance because they found Vitruvius's 10 books of architecture, right? And they were like, oh, that was the craze, was the discovery of this book and the style from Gothic medieval cathedrals to like back to the Roman Greek times, right?
Yeah.
So, and with that came this word architect came back into discovered and fashion. And he wrote this book, and he said in it, I'm paraphrasing, but how can the architect be a builder or be part of the building thing and still serve the client? Basically, the suggested today is that there's a conflict, because to really serve the client, you have to be separate from the builder.
Interesting. But
you know what? If you look back at that time, the word builder today means a certain thing. It means like general contractor, right? There was no such thing. What he was saying, the general contractor was not invented until the end of the 1800s, like mid 1800s. He was talking about like subcontractors. He was just saying that like somebody's got to be control of all these like trades.
Gotcha.
That's all he was saying. And if you like look at it today, like tell this story about your experience with this job that you are now taking over design build, because that's what that architect's viewpoint was.
So this particular architect, when we first started doing design build work, I proposed to this particular architect to team up to do design build projects together.
This was somebody you had been referring.
Yeah, someone had they'd referred us work in the past, and we'd referred work to them. And I said, hey, maybe we can work together. And their viewpoint was the client should never talk directly to the contractor. And that was a little surprising to hear, especially considering that I was offering a business opportunity. But anyway, so now years go by, and this particular architect is still referring us work. And a customer came to us, had been working with the architect for about a year and a half or so. They were over $60,000 into design at this point. The project was way over budget.
How big a project?
At the time, that the original set of plans were about probably an $800,000 project.
Okay.
You know, the customer was really looking to be around with fixtures and everything, maybe around 650. So we still had a good ways to go to get there. And unfortunately, at this point, the customer was in love with the design. It was brilliant. The design was amazing. It looked fantastic. And so they kept hanging on, working with the architect and paying for more iterations and more versions and more plans. And ultimately, I suggested the design build model to them. And ultimately, they came back to us, and we threw the plans in the trash and started over. And now we have a project that will probably be under 650. We will now they had been working, at this point, they had been working with the architect for probably over 2 years, maybe 2.5 years at this point. And from the time we took over, it's probably been 4 months now. We're creating our final drawings now, and we have a project within budget, and we will be under $20,000. We will have done the same product in a quarter of the time for close to a quarter of the price.
Awesome. Yeah, and I bet, like, conversely, I bet on the flip side, you know, Tim's a builder who's now really just to make service clients is gone to design build. Should have listened to me freaking years ago.
Maybe.
But how about the architect who's having, like, issues? I guess I'm like, that issue is probably, you know, just shitty contractors who underbid a job, because, you know, that whole setup, it actually lends itself to that, because you have this amazing project that where budget wasn't necessarily thought with, or really, like, even if it was thought with, there was no, like, full accountability for it. So then it goes out to bid, and then there is the urge to have, like, a low bidder there and, like, just freaking make it happen.
For sure.
Give the guy a chance. And
for sure.
And so, you know, on the architect side, going design build allows, you know, that's a freaking headache, man. It's like, then you get into, like, finger pointing and all this sort of thing during the construction.
Right.
It's not a good, man, you talk about effort, and, like, even if the end product turns out well, it's like, man, what did it take to get that, you know?
Right. Yeah, I'm often surprised at this, but again, I think the architecture community has done a good job. You got to hand it to them, and getting people to believe that that's the way it needs to be done.
Yeah.
Like that particular story I was telling you about, they were paying the architect by the hour.
Yeah.
So it didn't matter how many design
It's an incredible PR job by the architect to make society believe and feel like it's always been separated.
Right.
That's the thing that society's been duped on.
Right.
We're completely, like, it's forever. It's always been separate. And I know why, too. You want to know why?
I do.
All right. Because when the AIA was formed in the mid 1800s, builders formed it. They just did it as a way to raise their social status.
Gotcha.
And have a monopoly over the best projects by saying, hey, only we can call ourselves architect. Previous to that, anybody could call themselves an architect.
Okay.
That's not really where it got messed up. And, like, the PR, where the PR stuff came in, is it then got into universities, and universities commissioned history books on the history of the architect. Look at this, we're on the video. Okay. They if you look in what's taught what I was taught on like the history of the architect, you look in who commissioned the book, it's the universities. These books took the past and would take quotes from like Roman Greek times. Here's an actual example where like Cicero, he's some Roman orator. He wrote, the architect in one of his things, the architect did not do manual labor. And so in the history book, they'd be like, you see, it was separate then as it is now.
Wow.
But if you actually go back and read what Cicero was talking about, which I have, he was saying, the architect is the boss. He is the top builder.
Right.
And so he's just directing. But even it's not just actual general society. Like even in our industry, I am so surprised by the people that don't even know the derivation of the word architect is master builder. It was just never meant to be this way. It actually is asinine, does not make any sense. And so we bring in the truth here, man. That's what we do.
I appreciate the work you're doing.
Yeah, thank you, brother. Well, I appreciate your work. I appreciate you taking me on and helping me fill that void I had. And
Pleasure.
yeah. You want to say anything, Abalene? Say bye-bye?
Bye-bye.
All right. Do you want to say any parting words?
I guess that's it. Thank you.
All right, peace out.
Hey guys,
Hey.
are you going to waste me?
How'd you get on this boat, girl?